Hello friends, I'm Sandy Scroggins. I am here today to show you how I made 25 cards using the Echo Park Hello Valentine 6x6 paper pad and frames and tags ephemera pack. I also used the coordinating 12x12 solid cardstock. I did add red glitter peel-offs and hearts by Love from Lizzie, gems by Picket Fence Studios, and shaker mix by Paper Rose. For adhesive, I used FabriTac by Beacon, art glitter glue, and 3M pop-up tape. I also used Glossy Accents on one of the cards. All of my cards are standard American A2 size. Now let's get started. For my first card, I cut 2 pieces of pattern paper to 3" by 6" and adhered them to the card base at an angle. I then turned the card over and cut away the overhang. Next, I adhere a piece of 3" by 1" patterned paper overlapping the other 2 pattern papers, and I turn over the card again and cut away the overhang. Using some red glitter peel-offs, I adhere a piece on either side of the middle pattern paper to break apart the 3 pieces of pattern paper and to add a little sparkle and shine to my card. Using the 3M pop-up tape, I adhered the sentiment to the center cardstock at an angle. Then I added 2 red glitter hearts to the top right-hand side of the card and 1 to the bottom left-hand side of the card. I was able to make 2 cards using this design. And here are the completed cards. On my next card, I cut 2 pieces of pattern paper at 2 3/4" by 4 1/4" and adhered them to the card base. I placed a piece of red glitter peel-off in between the 2 pieces of pattern paper. Then I cut another piece of pattern paper at 3" by 6" and set it on the card base at an angle, overlapping both pieces of pattern paper already adhered to the card base. I turned the card over and cut the overhang. Then I adhered the pattern paper to the card. I added some red glitter peel-offs to the side and bottom of the cardstock to break apart the 3 different pattern paper pieces and to add some sparkle and shine to the card. Using 3M pop-up tape, I popped up the 2 sentiments on the card. Then I added 2 red glitter hearts to the top left-hand side of the card and 1 to the bottom right-hand side of the card. I was able to make 2 cards with this design. And here are the completed cards. For my third card, I cut 2 pieces of solid coordinating pink cardstock, one at 2.5 inches by 3.25 inches and one at 3.25 inches by 3.75 inches. I cut 2 pieces of pattern paper, one at 2.25 inches by 3 inches and one at 3.5 inches by 3 inches. I adhered the pattern paper to the pink cardstock. I added the 2.5 by 3.25 piece to the top left-hand side of the card. I added a small piece of white paper to the back side of the second piece of cardstock to make it level when I adhere it to the card base. Then I add it to the card base, slightly overlapping the smaller piece of cardstock. Using 3M pop-up tape, I added the 2-inch by 2-inch cut apart to the center of the card. I used Glossy Accents to color over the middle pink heart, and this completes this card. I was able to make 2 cards with this design. And here is the completed card. For my next card, I cut 2 pieces of pattern paper, one at 2.5 inches by 4.25 inches and one at 3 inches by 4.25 inches. I also cut a piece of black cardstock at 3.25 inches by 3 inches. I adhered the cut apart to the black cardstock. Then I adhered the 2 pieces of pattern paper to the card base. I placed a piece of red glitter peel-off in the center between the two pieces of pattern paper. This not only broke apart the two pieces of pattern paper, but it also added some extra sparkle and shine to the card. Then I adhered the cut apart to the center of the card. I placed two red glitter hearts to the top left-hand side of the card and one on the bottom right-hand side of the card. I was able to make 2 cards using this design. And here is the completed card. For my 5th card, I took a piece of coordinating cardstock and cut it to 4 1/4 inches by 5 1/2 inches and adhered it to the card base. I cut a piece of pattern paper at 5 inches by 4 inches, and I positioned it on my trimmer to cut a triangle, but then turned it slightly so that I would have one point and one flat end. I adhered the piece with the point to the right-hand side of the card. I flipped the other piece over and adhered it overlapping the first piece, again with the point pointing up and the flat side pointing towards the left side. Then I adhered the sentiment to the bottom of the card. I was able to make 2 cards using this design. I made them opposite of each other. And here are the completed cards. For my next card, I used some red and white twine and tied it through the hole in the tag sentiment. I cut 2 pieces of pattern paper, one at 3 inches by 4 inches and the other at 3 inches by 3 inches. I also cut a piece of coordinating cardstock at 1 inch by 4 1/4 inches. I adhered the 3 inch by 4 inch pattern paper at an angle on the left side of the card base. Then I adhered the 3 inch by 3 inch pattern paper straight and overlapping the angled pattern paper. I adhered the 1 inch by 4 1/4 strip of cardstock overlapping both pieces of pattern paper. Using 3M pop-up tape, I popped up the tag sentiment at an angle to the left side of the card. I added 2 red glitter hearts to the top right-hand side of the card, and I was able to make 2 cards using this design. And here are the completed cards. For my next card, I cut a piece of pattern paper at 1 1/2 inches by 5 1/2 inches. I then cut a piece of pattern paper at 5 inches by 3 inches, and then I cut a third piece of pattern paper at 3 inches by 2 inches. I punched out a heart from a piece of the coordinating cardstock. I adhered the 1 1/2 by 5 1/2 inch pattern paper about 1/4 inch from the bottom of the card base. I adhered the 5 inch by 3 inch pattern paper 1/2 inch from the top of the card base and overlapping the other pattern paper. I adhered the 3 inch by 2 inch pattern paper in the center of the 5 inch by 3 inch piece of pattern paper. Using 3M pop-up tape, I popped up the sentiment in the center of the 3 inch by 2 inch pattern paper. Then I added the red heart at an angle overlapping all 3 pieces of the pattern paper. I was able to make 2 cards using this design. And here are the completed cards. For my next card, a good portion of the footage was corrupted. I will do my best to talk you through how I made it. I cut a piece of coordinating cardstock to 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inches. I also cut another piece of coordinating cardstock at 3 1/4 by 3 3/4 inches and another at 6 by 6 inches. The one that I cut at 6 by 6 inches, I cut into 2 equal triangles. I cut a piece of pattern paper at 3 by 3 1/2 inches and then another at 5 3/4 by 5 3/4 inches and cut it into 2 equal triangles. I adhered the square pattern paper to the square coordinating cardstock. Then I adhered the triangle pattern papers to the triangle coordinating cardstock pieces. I adhered the 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 coordinating cardstock to the card base. Then I adhered one of the triangle pieces to the top left-hand side of the card and the other two to the bottom right-hand side of the card. The main points of the triangles are positioned towards the corners of the card. Then I adhered the square in the center of the card, overlapping the two triangles. Using 3M pop-up tape, I popped up the sentiment in the center of the card. Then I added 2 picket fence gems to the top left-hand side of the card and one on the bottom right-hand side of the square in the middle of the card. I was able to make 2 cards using this design, and these are the completed cards. For my 9th card, I cut a piece of coordinating cardstock at 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inches. Then I cut pattern paper at 3 inches by 6 inches, and I adhered the 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 cardstock to the card base. Then I adhered the 2 pattern papers to the card base at an angle. I turned the card over and trimmed off the overhang. I adhered red glitter peel-offs on the top, middle, and bottom of the pattern papers. This breaks up the pattern papers and adds extra sparkle and shine to the card. Using 3M pop-up tape, I popped up the sentiment and placed it at an angle in the center of the card. I placed 2 red glitter hearts to the top left-hand side of the card and one to the bottom right of the bottom pattern paper. I was able to make 3 cards using this design. And here are the completed cards. For my next card, I cut 2 pieces of pattern paper to 5 1/2 by 1 1/4 inches. I also cut 2 pieces of pattern paper to 5 1/4 inches by 1 inch. I took a piece of red and white twine and tied it to the tag sentiment. Then I adhered the pattern papers together. I adhered the first pattern paper 1/4 of an inch from the left side of the card. Then I adhered the second pattern paper next to the first. Using 3M pop-up tape, I popped up the tag sentiment and placed it to the right and overlapping the right pattern paper. And that completes this card. I was able to make 2 cards with this design, and here are the completed cards. For my last card, I cut a piece of pattern paper at 1.5 inches by 4 inches and a second pattern paper at 3 inches by 4 inches. I adhered the 1.5 by 4 inch pattern paper to the top left-hand side of the card base. Then I overlapped it with the 3 inch by 4 inch patterned paper. I overlapped the 3 inch by 4 inch cut apart to the pattern paper. Then I adhered 2 red picket fence gems to the upper right-hand side of the card and 1 to the bottom left in between the angle between the cut apart and pattern paper. I was able to make 2 cards with this design, and this is the completed card. And here is a look at the 25 cards I made with this paper collection. Thank you so much for watching my video. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe and give me a thumbs up. Have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.